All right, everyone, welcome back to AP World History. Today we're going to be talking topic 1.3, and this is going to focus on the developments of South and Southeast Asia. So we're going around to another region in this Unit 1 Global Tapestry. So let's get started. So our essential question for today, and I should say questions, so we have two. Identify and explain how Hinduism, Islam, and Buddhism influenced the culture and political developments in South and Southeast Asia in the period of 1200 to 1450. So it's a very broad and encompassing question, so make sure you're thinking about certain examples as we go along as well to help fortify your answers. Now, the next question is, to what extent were the emerging states of South and Southeast Asia similar to each other during the period of 1200 to 1450? And remember, when we talk about to what extent, is it a high, low extent? How are they similar? How are they different? So make sure you give some responses to all parts of the question. So this is our basic overview, and once again, provided by Ben Freeman, this graphic organizer of the region of South and Southeast Asia, and all the different states that we'll be talking about that are going to pop up during this time period of 1200 to 1450. And so we're going to be hitting the vast majority of these today. So basic context, all right? The regions of South and Southeast Asia is a very religiously and ethnically diverse region altogether, and it's the climate is mostly within the tropics themselves. So we're talking hot. We're talking a lot of forest. Rainforest, that is. So there's a lot of diversity in the environment already in place, right? It also is because of that, it's highly involved in the trade networks of the Indian Ocean. There's a lot of commodities that come out of South and Southeast Asia, and there's a lot of people. I mean, the populations of South Asia alone were some of the highest in the world at the time, if not the highest, maybe rivaled by China. So going into cultural development and interactions are one of our major themes of AP World. And so the language of the curriculum is Hinduism, Islam, and Buddhism, and their core beliefs and practices continue to shape societies in South and Southeast Asia. So as a continuation, these religions have been around for some time. Islam is the newest one on the scene, but they will all play a role in influencing the cultures and peoples of this region, these regions, I should say. So we're going to start with Sufism. And Sufis we talked about in our previous lecture in 1.2, Dar al-Islam. And the Sufis were the Islamic mystics and mystics, not mythics, mystics. And they are going to be a really important player in the whole spreading of Islam into South and Southeast Asia, in particular South Asia, where Hinduism very much centers around a lot of spiritualism and the beliefs of the many gods and so forth. And there's a lot of spirituality that comes with that particular religion. But there are some things that a lot of Hindus are not a fan of, and the caste system being one of them, where you're born into a certain caste, you don't have the opportunities to climb the social ladder and have social mobility. And so Islam is going to provide that. And so because the Sufis bring that spiritual element to the game and such as well, it finds a very appealing religion to many of the South Asians and to some extent the Southeast Asian peoples themselves. So Sufis, again, playing a big role in this region in the spread of Islam. So this is something that we already talked about in the last lecture. And so, to fortify that once again, which probably means you should know about the Sufis for your long-term memory in AP World. So because of the introduction of Islam into South Asia, you do see there is resistance from certain Hindu cultures from the religion of Islam itself. But there's also, there are people who are looking at both religions, both Hinduism and Islam, and they see something that both of them share in common with each other. And so we start to see, just like anywhere else where you have the blending of cultures, some syncretic beliefs that kind of come through that. And, one of them during this time period was the Bhakti movement. And the Bhakti movement is going to occur during medieval India, And it's a theological and political movement that happens within India during the 12th century. And it attempts to blend the ideas of Hinduism and Islam closer together, where they're trying to find here are some things that they share in common. And one person in particular that you should make note to is Guru Kabir. And he was an individual who taught that the Hindu gods and Allah were essentially one and the same. The Hindu gods were a collection, how Hindu looks at them, but essentially the collection of the gods, the pantheon of the gods, really represents one singular idea, and that is one of Allah, which is presented in Islam. And Allah himself, or Allah, can present himself in many forms, in many different ways. And so that's something that they're trying to kind of blend those ideas once again, right? It was also a renewal to a challenge of the intense social hierarchy of the caste system, which I talked about itself. And so it focuses mainly on the idea of individuals' ability to reach this enlightened state, try to find that spiritual satisfaction, and regardless of what caste that they were in. So it didn't matter if you were an untouchable or a Brahmin, then you are essentially pursuing the same spiritual enlightenment. So that's something that, again, makes it very appealing. There's a lot less adherence to tradition and so forth as well. Now, the movement itself is largely unsuccessful. And the reason why I think we bring it up in AP World is that it does kind of make waves for future syncretic beliefs that will become more popular in India, in particular Sikhism, that does, a new revelation, a new religion that does blend ideas of both Hinduism and of Islam. Okay. Something else that also continues to happen in this region, and the influence it has, is Buddhist monasticism. I get tongue-tied. And the monasteries that were built, these are communities of men and women, either monks or nuns, that essentially feel that they need to have their entire focus on the religion, in this case of Buddhism, and their complete focus mainly on finding inner peace and enlightenment, nirvana, whatever you want to term it as, right? And so they completely devote their lives to finding that inner peace, and living separate from society altogether. And so that is something that continues to happen. And even today, if you go to Southeast Asia, there are a lot of countries in which you will find a lot of monasteries where monks are completely separated from society, and they are performing daily rituals and things to help find that inner peace and get rid of material possession and so on and so forth, right? But anyway, they do play a role in helping educate people as well, because their lives are about exploring and understanding the world. They learn a lot of things about medicine and healing, and so that's something they can teach people of society so much more so. And so, another example of how Buddhism influences this region. Okay, and because of the nature of the monasteries, they would receive lots of gifts for their help and wisdom and so forth. So they amass a great amount of wealth, these monasteries. This is not unlike what happens in Europe with the Catholic Church and the monasteries there. They amass an amount of gifts because people pay alms or tithing to the faith. Okay. So moving on to government, the next theme with Southeast Asia, state formation and development demonstrated continuity, innovation, and diversity, including new Buddhist and Hindu states that emerged in South and Southeast Asia. Okay, so we're going to have there's a lot of examples we're going to go on here. So if I am going on too long, you guys need to take a break, pause it, come back, so that you don't get overwhelmed with the amount of information. But we're going to go through a lot of examples that the College Board has provided for us. Okay, the first one is in South Asia, India, and it's the Rajput kingdoms. Okay, so they are around from like circa 6th century to 16th century, so almost 1,000 years. And they are going to be formed after the fall of the Gupta Empire, which is an empire, powerful empire in India for a long time. And the Gupta Empire was a very centralized empire. And so when the empire falls, you get these small kingdoms that are largely decentralized kind of take their place, right? And the competition between these kingdoms can sometimes be fierce as they're competing for resources and control over trade and other things. This led them very vulnerable because they were not a united front. That left them very vulnerable for Muslim armies to come in. And that does happen with the Mamluks, which we talked about last time, and come in kind of formulate the Sultanate of Delhi. The Rajputs generally were Hindu leaders, and they were often, again, in competition with the invading Muslim armies that established states like the Sultanate of Delhi. In the 11th century, many of the Hindu and Buddhist sacred sites were plundered by the Sultanate of Delhi, and then they erected mosques in their place. Which led to a lot of anger from the local population, something that has not gone away even to this day, where we see fierce rivalries between populations of Muslims and Hindus in India to this day. Okay, I wrote it down so that I can pronounce this correctly. Vijayanagara Empire. This is an empire that is going to exist in South Asia for some time, mostly on the southern tip of South Asia. So this highlighted area here, okay? And is South Asia is rarely united through its history, and even today, it's even though India is one country, it's regionalized very, very distinctly. So yeah, but that's something throughout their history. So the Vijayanagara, was an empire that was established by two brothers, Haryana and Bukka, from Delhi Sultanate, and they were told to go travel down south to extend the power of the Sultanate of Delhi and such. And the brothers were born into Hinduism. They converted to Islam. But when they went down to conquer this, they, instead of like conquering for the Sultanate of Delhi, they kind of keep it for themselves and for their future generations and of their family. And they are going to reconvert back into Hinduism, kind of establishing a new Hindu state that was kind of breaking off completely from the Sultanate of Delhi. So they established trade, considering the geographical location that they were in. They're kind of in the midst of a center point between the trade to Africa, the east coast of Africa, as well as the trade to East Asia and China. So it makes them very powerful as a result of this, and they become a major influence in South Asia because of the amount of trade and goods that go through this region. So that's something that's important to note. And because of the amount of money that they tax for this trade that go through their lands and such, they took a lot of that money and built these very impressive like temples and architectural wonders, some of them which you'll see right here inside the PowerPoint itself. Okay, so the Sunhalu dynasties, they are going to be another example of a Buddhist state that are built on the island of Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka, here's the island, but for those who need reference, it's this island right here, Sri Lanka. And it's a fairly big island, so a lot of people who do live there. But this dynasty is going to rule over Sri Lanka for roughly 2,300 years. That's quite a run. And so they're around until 1815, and when you start to see the British show up and kind of weaken their powers over that land. So their roots kind of fall in the third century BC, that is. And so they were originally established by Buddhist merchants that traveled there and basically set up shop there to make business with the resources that were there. As a result of those ties and such, this became, despite the fact that most of South Asia, in particular India, continues to practice Hinduism, and then later Islam shows up. They, keep Buddhism as the main religion there, and it becomes a pretty powerful center for Buddhist studies and devotion. You have some monasteries that are all built there, and as well. The government itself would oversee, massive public works projects on the island, including irrigation systems to help improve food and cash crop production and so forth. But over time, attacks from India and then also internal conflicts weakened the kingdom. And again, they eventually kind of fall under the control of or heavy influence of the European imperial powers, such as Great Britain. So the next one is the Kemmer Empire, and Kemmer Empire is also known as Angkor, and this is formed in Southeast Asia, and during the 9th century, and it's going to be around for a good long time up until 1431, and it covers the most of the lands of Southeast Asia, including modern-day Thailand, Malaysia, Laos, as well as Thailand. Did I say Thailand already? Well, Cambodia is in there as well, if I hadn't mentioned that, okay? But they largely, so like you would think, because of their geographic location, that they would be heavily involved in the Indian Ocean Trade Network, and that would be the source of their power. And it's not that they weren't involved in the Indian Ocean Trade Network. They were very much so. But the source of their power was from the amount of goods that they gained in the interior of their lands. So even like their big cities were kind of on the interior and not along the coastline. And they built these large, complex irrigation and drainage systems, which led to huge economic prosperity because they were able to produce so much, considering that the land was so good for it, that they just, it was fertile, constantly gets rain and so forth, and this helped kind of build their power, so to say, right? The capital of their empire was Angkor Thom, and it would have lots of different buildings or temples that were built there that have a lot of Hindu influence. Even the more commonly known Angkor Wat, that one is got a lot of buildings that have a lot of heavy amounts of Hindu influence as well. I'll show you an example why that is here in the next slide. Later, the rulers of Kemmer eventually convert to Buddhism. And even though they convert to Buddhism, they do not destroy these Hindu artwork and temples. They mainly just kind of add on to it to include Buddhist themes. So even today, if you go visit these sites and such, you will find the influence of both religions in the same place. The crossing over of different cultures, which AP and College Board love to talk about, where you see cultures overlapping each other and blending together all together, right? So here's Angkor Wat. This is one of the temples that were built by the Kemmer Empire. And the reason why this is like it has Hindu influences, if you can look at it here, you have these different levels of this. I don't even know what the proper term for this architectural creation is, but right here you can see there's different levels, right? They are supposed to represent the different levels of the caste. And if you are of a certain caste, you can go above this certain level. So that's like one way to identify that Hindu architecture. So if you ever get a primary source that is showing you a picture of Hindu architecture, this is a good clue of that being this kind of step I gotta find the right name for this. If anyone knows, please write in the comments what the proper term for this architectural building is, right? Okay, so the Kemmer Empire is around for a while, but eventually it does fall. And what eventually comes is the Sukhothai kingdoms. And the Sukhothai was kind of where modern day Thailand is from 1238 to 1438. So it replaces the Khmers. The structures of Angkor Thom and Angkor Wat are not destroyed, despite the fact that they are Buddhists, and they unite the kingdom under the idea of Theravada Buddhism. And so that's something that is kind of important to note for posterity, right? But the most famous ruler, and I looked this one up too, so let me try it again here. Ram Kam Hain. He is going to be their most famous ruler. He is the promoter of trade and diplomacy and arts. Really kind of promotes the outwardness of his empire and so forth. So under his rule, like the Thai Rin language as we know it today becomes developed. And it's the kind of formulation of the Siamese culture as we know it today. Okay, the Srijaya Empire, which is another empire. This is going to be found primarily located in Southeast Asia on the islands that make up Indonesia as well as Malaysia right here. So the Srivijaya is a maritime empire, and it's a Buddhist maritime empire, to be more specific, that has a huge amount of influence and control over trade in this time period in this region. And the big reason for that is the Srivijaya have control over one of the most important and busiest waterways still in the world today, and that is this one right here, the Strait of Malacca. And because it's kind of a choke point, so here, I wish I had put up a better map for this, but and you can see it's right here. Here's China, here's India. And unless you want to go around this funky, trade route around these islands and so forth, your best bet was to go through the Strait of Malacca. So think about all of the goods and commodities and so forth that are going to go through that strait. And because it's such a small choke point, a powerful navy pretty much can stop any merchant ship that goes through there and then tax them for the right to travel through there. And the amount of money you can get can build more ships, wield more power. And so the Srivijaya empire becomes a very powerful empire during this time that ends up having a great deal of influence. And their navy was said to be so powerful that they could even had a lot of influence on the East African Swahili city-states as well. And so even though they're nobody in this Indian Ocean Trade Network ever becomes fully in control of the Indian Ocean Trade Networks, their influence on this part of the network was very much heavy and felt. Okay. And then the last empire that we're going to talk about is the Majapahit. The Majapahit Empire was is located primarily on the Javanese island, which is this one right here. And it was a Hindu-Buddhist kingdom, so it kind of a blend of the two. And just like with the last one, the Srivijaya Empire, they were pretty powerful and controlled a lot of this region, the Strait of Malacca, at some point in history as well. You can see that they kind of ultimately replace the Srivijaya Empire after it collapses. And so they had 98 tributary states under its control. So very powerful island empire, and then all these small little islands they had control over them and would require them to pay tribute in the form of spices and other goods and stuff. Okay. All right. So in a nutshell, that is what is going to happen in developments of South and Southeast Asia. Again, your essential questions are on Canvas, and you're welcome to answer them as soon as possible. Make sure you submit those with the examples that help better fortify your responses and your answers, okay? With that being said, that's it for me. We will get into next time 1.4, which will be the state building in the Americas. So until then, everyone take care, stay healthy, and I will see you next time.